In the early 1900s, there was a city club with two different groups within the club. There was the Women's City Club and the City Club. How the two clubs differ is that the City Club, first of all, was men and wanted to help businesses and industries through job training programs in public schools, while the Women's City Club of Chicago wanted to help people, making sure everyone had schools, doctors, houses, etc. Both city clubs had the same mission when founded, and that was that the wealthier citizens of the city were responsible for the well-being of all residents. In the early 1900s, the roles of men and women were very different. The men worked outside the homes and businesses, leaders of industry in Chicago. The women worked in houses, and they would cook, clean, raise children, and do other household jobs. If they worked outside the home, they would work as caretakers such as nurses and teachers. Only a small percentage of the women in the Women's City Club were married to the men in the City Club. Two of the women in the Women's City Club were Jane Addams and Ida B. Wells. Jane Addams was a very important woman in the City Club because she was one of the founders of the Jane Addams Hull House. The Jane Addams Hull House was a mansion made into a settlement home that was mostly used for providing recreational facilities for slum children and fought for child labor laws. Ida B. Wells was an early leader for civil rights movement. She was also one of the founders of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, NAACP. Middle-class women in Chicago created the Women's City Club of Chicago in 1910 to help foster civic responsibility, promote public issues of women, and the common good of society. If you remember the importance of the Women's City Club of Chicago on the women's suffrage movement and as a major precursor to women's equality and introduction into politics. How my project is related to debate and diplomacy is because, first, the Women's City Club are representatives of Chicago, and the definition of diplomacy is the art of dealing with people in a sensible and effective way, or the profession, activity, or skill of managing international relationships typically by a country representative boards. The Women's City Club was a very big representative of Chicago in the 1900s, and were involved in a lot of Chicago's early politics. Second, there are a lot of debates in developing the politics around the welfare of Chicago. The source I used to prove my thesis is a speech that Jane Addams wrote. Jane Addams was a very important member of the Women's City Club of Chicago and founder of the Hull House. The Hull House was a settlement house in Chicago, named after the original house's first owner, Charles Gerald Hull. The Hull House was for European immigrants that recently arrived in the States that needed a home and to help getting citizenship in the States. The speech I chose was given to over 1,000 people in Topeka, Kansas, and was about the Hull House and how it helped lots of different immigrants, especially the Polish and the Russians, during a big famine in Viola Valley, Russia. That was one of the reasons why Jane Addams had classes how to get citizenships in the States. So with the money the immigrants made, they could go back to their native country with some of the money they've made to give their relatives for food, better housing, etc. For the Russians to help their relatives with a very big famine in a valley in Russia. Another thing that she did is a speech how the famine affected the Viola Valley community, like how there are a lot of people who are living on eating grass cakes made out of powdered grass, roots, and twigs. When Jane heard that, she said she was going to address the State Agriculture Society in Topeka that week on the Russian situation to help them more. My source was a speech written by Ida B. Wells called Lynch Law in America. She gave the speech in Chicago, Illinois. Ida B. Wells was an early civil rights activist for women and black rights. She was a member of the Women's City Club of Chicago. She was also the founder of the NAACP. The NAACP is the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, and is a civil rights group in the United States founded in 1909. Lynching is a mob killing someone, especially by hanging, by age offense without a legal trial. It happened a lot in the early 1900s because there are segregation rules like black and white schools, bathrooms, restaurants, etc. How this proves my thesis is that Ida B. Wells was very devoted to black and women's rights. When the Women's City Club successfully paved the way for women's voting rights, Ida focused her attention on black rights and formed the NAACP. Ida B. Wells' contribute to equal rights helped make the world what it is today, much like Jane Addams did with immigrant rights. The source I used to help my evidence is an article named The History of Chicago's Public Bathhouses by Dr. Neil Gale. The article is about Dr. Sarah Hackett Stevenson and the other women who helped create the Chicago public bathhouses in the early 1900s. Dr. Sarah Hackett Stevenson was a doctor at the Women's Hospital Medical College who was concerned about the citizens' health in Chicago because the lower class citizens did not have much access to fresh water to bathe, cook, or drink. So she helped form the Women's Reform Organization in Chicago, the Municipal Order League, later renamed the Free Bath and Sanitary League, with two other women, Greta Gale Wellington and Julia R. Lowe. What were the public bathhouses used for? The houses were used for getting water, for cooking food, bathing, and drinking, because at the time there was no running water for the lower classes of Chicago. The three women were responsible for public beaches in Chicago as well. So you can thank three determined women, Greta Gale Wellington, Sarah Hackett Stevenson, and Julia R. Lowe, for summer days at the beach. My topic matters in history because there was a lot of change in Chicago and in the U.S. because of the Women's City Club. The members of the Women's City Club made significant tributes to Chicago, like how Jane Addams helped lots of immigrants with citizenship and getting jobs. The U.S. is a country made up of immigrants. Jane Addams opened the Hull House to help people new to the U.S. become citizens, or how Ida B. Wells fought for female and black rights and was very successful at both and known for both. Unlike Jane Addams, Ida B. Wells used peaceful protests to achieve change in women's rights. Then, after women received local suffrage rights in 1913, Ida turned her attention to black rights and funded the NAACP, which became a very important for change for fighting for equal rights. Lastly, Dr. Sarah Hackett Stevenson led the Municipal Order League's committee for all public bathhouses. She wanted lower-class men, women, and children to have access to public beaches and the water in Lake Michigan. Her campaign results in the establishment of the public bathhouses and public beaches along the Chicago Lakeshore. The Women's City Club helped enhance health, environment, education, and sanitary conditions in the city of Chicago. These women are often forgotten in history, but made so much change in the U.S. so that we have the world we live in today. In conclusion, the Women's City Club of Chicago made significant changes in the city we live in today. Jane Addams helped with immigrants and their rights. Ida B. Wells fought for black and women rights with peaceful protests and her powerful words. And lastly, Dr. Sarah Hackett Stevenson established public bathing houses and beaches. The accomplishments of these three determined women are very important. Jane Addams helped with countless immigrants with citizenship and getting jobs. The U.S. is a country made up of immigrants. She opened the Hull House to help people new to the U.S. become citizens. Ida B. Wells fought for female and black rights and was very successful and known for both. Unlike Jane Addams, Ida B. Wells used peaceful protests to achieve change in women's rights. Then, after Illinois women received local suffrage rights in 1913, Ida turned her attention to black rights. She founded the NAACP, which became a very important part for fighting for equal rights. Lastly, Dr. Sarah Hackett Stevenson led the Municipal Order League's committee for all public bathhouses. She wanted lower-class men, women, and children to have access to beaches and the waters of Lake Michigan. Her campaign resulted in the establishment of public bathhouses and beaches along Chicago's lakeshore. Overall, the Women's City Club helped enhance equal rights for women and blacks, education, and sanitary conditions in the city of Chicago. These women are often forgotten in history but made so much change in the U.S. so that we have the world we live in today. When I started my project, I thought more about how it was cool that these women made so much change in a time where women weren't getting the rights they should. But now that I learned so much, it inspired me to want to improve my life and others in my community. This last picture shows where these three extraordinary women worked in the city of Chicago.